Welcome back to the channel. This will be the transfer tips for Gameweek 31. We have multiple injuries to contend with, and I'll provide some updates in this particular podcast. And keep your eyes peeled for the team selection and the Saturday deadline stream, where future updates will be provided when they come about, and everything else you need to know for the Gameweek 31 deadline will be provided. Smash the like button of this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream, both FPL and UCL Fantasy. There will be Champions League content over the weekend and going into next week with a Tuesday deadline stream for Matchday 13, the first leg of the quarterfinals. So both fantasy formats will be provided the most extensive coverage, and you will be in a great position to tackle both of them in the best possible way. Check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Spotify, my X, Instagram and Blue Sky are all in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The most transferred in player this week is Bukayo Saka, and by quite some distance. He has double the amount of transfers in compared to second place Marmush, as you saw in the graphics towards the beginning of this podcast. Now, a couple of weeks ago, during the beginning of the international break, Bukayo Saka was orange flagged, and I thought he would be benched against Fulham, which turned out to be the case. But as we approached the deadline, a lot of reliable sources indicated that he would start, and it seemed to be a late decision for him not to actually get the nod in the end. But he came off the bench, scored the winning goal after missing the last 101 days of action, and he transformed that Arsenal attack. And the Gunners played relatively well in the second half and created multiple chances. But I just think Saka gave that extra level to all the other players in that attack, and Marino and Martinelli both played very well. They combined for Saka's goal, and it was a great assist by the Brazilian. But I just think with Saka, he is a great purchase for Gameweek 33, so you don't need to buy him in just yet against Everton away. But certainly, I think the way FPL is leaning towards for the end of this season, it does make a lot of sense to buy Bukayo Saka, and I would expect him to start in the next couple of matches. But in terms of the best time to buy him, I would suggest Gameweek 32 or Gameweek 33, where he could be captained against Ipswich Town away and potentially Crystal Palace at home. It's very likely that Arsenal and Crystal Palace will double in that particular game week and blank in Gameweek 34. Then Arsenal have a relatively tough spell between Gameweeks 35 and 37, where they face Bournemouth at home, who have been struggling actually in the last couple of matches in terms of performances and results. Then Liverpool away, followed up by Newcastle at home. But Arsenal complete this Premier League season with a trip to Southampton, the worst team in the Premier League. But I have to say, with Bukayo Saka, he's just a great purchase up until the blank in Gameweek 34. So if you've got the free hit, you should have no issues or qualms about buying the Arsenal star player there. He has 6 goals in the Premier League season with 11 assists, and he has missed a lot of action. Of course, he did have that injury since December the 21st, and he averages 6.8 points per match, which is only bettered by Mohamed Salah and is joint second with Alexander Isak. He has 115 points overall, and his ownership is steadily rising to 14.4%. The same goes for his price tag, which is currently 10.3 million, and all the underlying stats are relatively decent, but in terms of the goal-scoring numbers, they aren't the best because he has 6 big chances in 17 appearances and an expected goals figure of 4.89, which certainly could be bettered. I know he hasn't played a lot of football, but even with the appearances and minutes he has got this season, it does pale in comparison to Cole Palmer, Mohamed Salah, and these other top FPL assets in the midfield. But 42 key passes and 19 big chance created goes to show how important Saka is in terms of creativity for the Arsenal side, both from set pieces and open play. So I would definitely recommend buying Bukayo Saka, and I said this a couple of weeks ago, but I was just a bit kind of off-put by the Fulham fixture and the fact he was just coming off the back of an injury, and at that time I didn't expect him to start whatsoever, but he came off the bench, proved his worth, and he did relatively well considering how much football he has missed. I would definitely buy Bukayo Saka just in time for Double Gameweek 33. Anthony Gordon has missed the last 3 matches across all competitions, the Carabao Cup final, which Newcastle ended up winning anyway, and that caused a blank in 29 for teams like Newcastle and Liverpool. He also blanked in Gameweeks 28 and 30. He didn't feature because of that 3-game suspension that he picked up in the FA Cup against Brighton, but Eddie Howe said the following about his injury, which he sustained during the beginning of the recent international break. He has some nasty bruising around his thigh, but he's up and running and feeling quite good. He's not trained with the group yet, so we anticipate he'll do that within the next few days. So it looks pretty positive in terms of his maybe status and also prospects about starting in Gameweek 31 against Leicester away. And it's one of the best midfielders for Double Gameweek 32 with 2 home fixtures against Man United and Crystal Palace. And the fixtures afterwards are still quite decent up until Gameweek 37 when they face Arsenal away. But Newcastle boast a good record against the Gunners this season, and Anthony Gordon has been a key part of that with 6 Premier League goals, 6 assists, 15 big chances, and 113 FPL points. His price tag is relatively decent at 7.4 million, so he should be accessible for most people watching this video, and he is currently yellow flagged with that knock, but I'd be very confident he will start the next couple of Premier League matches, especially just in time for that double game week, and all the underlying numbers are relatively solid, I'd say, with an XG figure of 8.01, the expected assist is 4.62, and 49 key passes. So Anthony Gordon, in my opinion, is a purchase. The likes of Harvey Barnes might be a decent one-week punt against Leicester away if Gordon isn't ready to start just yet, but I certainly will be looking to buy Gordon just in time for Double Gameweek 32. If you're on the market for Double Gameweek 32 assets and are struggling for that third Newcastle player, I think a cheap defender like Livramento or Dan Burn could do the job. Now, in the case of Burn, he's on 8 yellow cards, so you need to watch out for that, but he should be fine in terms of avoiding a suspension as long as he can go the next 3 Premier League matches without 2 bookings. And in the case of Livramento, there is no suspension risk, but there's also not much attacking threat. Both Burn and Livramento have 0 goals and 0 assists in this Premier League campaign, but Dan Burn scored in the Carabao Cup final, and he does offer that threat from set pieces due to his height. And Livramento has an expected assist figure of 1.32, only 67 FPL points, and Dan Burn isn't much better at around 75, but both of them are very cheap at 4.5 and 4.4 million respectively, so I think they could be decent options. And in the case of Kieran Trippier, this is something I've talked about in my recent streams and videos. I think his injury record in the last year or so has been very poor, and that's why I would avoid going for Trippier, who is significantly more expensive than both Burn and Livramento. And Eddie Howe said that Kieran Trippier went off with cramp sensation in his groin in that 2-1 victory over Brentford in Game Week 30. So if you are looking for that Newcastle defender, I would just go for Livramento or Dan Burn. Even Nick Pope in goal is a decent shout, but in general, I think the priorities would be in the midfield and forward line with Isak and then one of Jacob Murphy or Anthony Gordon. One possible mistake I made on my wildcard was keeping Justin Kluivert, but I did say in the last couple of streams and videos that even if he misses out against Ipswich Town, I would expect him to be available in Game Week 31, but there is a quick turnaround, and that's why he remains a doubt, and he has been orange flagged. And Iriola confirmed that Kluivert missed out the game against Ipswich Town due to overload and tightness and not because of a serious injury, which is positive news, but because of that quick turnaround, there is still a big doubt about whether he starts against West Ham or not, and that does help me a little bit in terms of team selection headaches and benching dilemmas if Kluivert is still going to be a major doubt for that game. But I just think with the Dutchman, he is a solid FPL option, and I looked at the players at his price and below, and apart from Sarr and Murphy, who are already in my squad, I don't see many budget midfielders who really stand out as Justin Kluivert does, with the penalty duties, decent underlying numbers, and also some pretty consistent returns for a player of his price tag. He is currently at 6.3 million, but he could go down in price fairly soon. He is currently the most transferred out player at the time of this recording, although he does face some stern competition in that regard. I would still keep Kluivert for now, especially if you're looking to bench boost in Game Week 32 or 33. He could be a great option who facilitates your more expensive players in other positions, and he can also do very well himself, and he's the only Bournemouth player I would consider keeping at this moment in time. Alexander Isak has done relatively well to stay fit for the vast majority of this season, as opposed to recent campaigns, but there have been a lot of occasions this season where he does come off with an injury or he goes yellow flagged into the next deadline, and that is the case for Game Week 31. Now, Eddie Howe said the following about why Isak was withdrawn against Brentford in their 2-1 victory yesterday, and he said he wasn't feeling 100% and wasn't sure in his movement. Hopefully he's okay. So it seems to be a slight groin issue, and hopefully he is available for Game Week 31, but there is the possibility that even if he is fit to be on the bench, he might not start the game. They give him the rest and they get the job done against Leicester regardless, and then they save Isak for the double game week against Man United and Crystal Palace. So even if Isak pays off your faith and patience by returning between Game Weeks 32 to 35, and it's also very crucial to add that he features in blank Game Week 34 as a great captaincy option against Ipswich Town at home, he also would have been a great option for the armband this week, and he might still end up being that, but there is that slight concern with the yellow flag, and if Isak doesn't start against Leicester, that could be a massive gut wrench there for those that end up going for the Swedish striker as their captain this week. So there is a slight doubt about whether he starts against Leicester or not, but I think he will be available fairly soon. I don't think the injury will be serious, but of course, any updates that are provided by Eddie Howe or reliable sources in terms of journalists, they will be relayed on this channel in my videos on live streams. But at the moment, I would keep Alexander Isak, who has been instrumental to Newcastle's Carabao Cup win and also their aspirations for the Champions League spots. Of course, 5th place would be enough to guarantee that qualification next season, and he's got 20 Premier League goals, 5 assists, 33 bonus points, and 177 FPL points overall. His ownership is still going up. It's currently 58.7% despite the yellow flag, and all the numbers are tremendous. 28 big chances, 10 big chance created, 37 key passes, and 72 shots overall. He has been very clinical. The XG is 15.93, and he has outperformed that, and it's still quite sustainable and healthy overall. So Alexander Isak is still worth holding on to, and if he is no longer yellow flagged and in the clear, he becomes a purchase once again. We are now in the sell section, and another injury doubt going into Gameweek 31 is Gabriel Magalhaes, who was subbed off after 15 minutes against Fulham in Arsenal's 2-1 victory in Gameweek 30. But some reports by journalists like John Cross indicate that Gabriel will miss both legs against Real Madrid, and that means he will be out of the equation for Gameweek 31 and 32. And he's a major doubt for Double Gameweek 33, where he was very appealing against Ipswich Town away and Crystal Palace at home, and then Arsenal blank in Gameweek 34, should that fixture go into Gameweek 33, and if not, it will likely be in Gameweek 36, and once that is confirmed, I will also confirm that and relay that information on this channel. But it is a big shame. I think going from Gabriel to Saliba is a decent switch. Even Jurriën Timber, who is less of a concern than Gabriel, but also yellow flagged. Of course, you wouldn't be buying him in right now, as I'll discuss very soon, but I think Gabriel Magalhaes is a sell, unfortunately. He has 3 goals and 2 assists this season and 20 shots inside the box, but I think his goal scoring threat has definitely dropped off a cliff. And with Saka's return, I was actually anticipating him to get 1 or 2 more goals this season, because a lot of Gabriel's output has actually come from Bukayo Saka's crosses from set pieces. And with that return, things were looking quite good for Arsenal, but it just seems like they can't really enjoy too much this season. And one key player comes back in and another one comes out. The likes of Ben White, Calafiori, Jurriën Timber are also injury doubts, and they all happened over the last week during the international break and then going into Gameweek 30. So Arsenal's defensive situation looks a bit different now, and the likes of Kiwior could be starting week in, week out, and whilst he can perform fairly well, he does have that odd mistake in him, so it's going to be a tough ask for them against Real Madrid, and even in some of these fixtures, like Everton away, Brentford at home, and Crystal Palace, who might rotate by that stage because they've got an FA Cup semi-final to look forward to around Gameweek 34, so they might rotate there, but I still think they can cause problems to that Gunners defence, and Fulham had multiple big chances despite not playing that well on the night. So Gabriel is a sell. Let's wait for the scans and see what they're saying. Hopefully there's a more positive update, but unfortunately, I'd be very surprised if Gabriel was available in the next couple of weeks. Ola Aina has been one of the standout right-backs in this Premier League season, but Nottingham Forest now have a major concern going into the FA Cup semi-final in a couple of weeks' time, because Nico Williams is suspended and Aina could be unavailable for the next couple of matches, and he was seen on crutches after the 1-0 victory over Man United, but he was subbed off just before half-time, and that could be a massive blow to Forest's maybe FA Cup hopes and also Champions League qualification. But they're in a very strong position, and I have to say right now, they are probably closer to Arsenal than they are to 4th place, because they have been so consistent this season. Aina has 2 goals and 1 assist, only 2 shots on target, and 123 FPL points, and over the last couple of weeks, and even from January, basically, I've been suggesting that Milenkovic is the best defender to invest in from Nottingham Forest, and Nico Williams should start virtually every single Premier League game from now until the end of the season. But maybe Alex Moreno does get more starts now, with Aina potentially out of the equation in Gameweek 31, and we see Nico Williams start as the right back. But let's wait and see what the updates are from Nuno. He doesn't know yet, and they're going to wait for scans, which is the kind of typical response from managers. Arteta said the same thing about Timber and Gabriel, although he was less optimistic, it seems, than Nuno Espirito Santo, especially in the case of Gabriel Magalhaes. But with Ola Aina, I think he's worth selling. He's also at 5.4 million, so unless you've got a lot of value tied up in him, you can definitely go to other defenders of very good quality, like Daniel Munoz, who doubles in Gameweek 32 and potentially Gameweek 33, and also focus on Newcastle with the likes of Livramento and Dan Burn. Over the last couple of days, I discussed Erling Haaland's injury in my team selection and the deadline stream, and he's going to miss the next 5 to 7 weeks worth of action, and the hope is that he's back for the Club World Cup by the end of the season. So this is a very easy sell, but Erling Haaland's ownership remains at 25% at the moment, and it will go down by the time this video is published, but he's still going to be owned by quite a lot of FPL managers, mainly dead teams you could say, or those that are inactive. But he's got 21 goals, 3 assists, 39 big chances, great underlying stats, and he would have made things very interesting in terms of, do we go for Haaland and Salah at the same time and then drop the likes of Saka and Palmer, or do we find a way to fit 3 of them in, or perhaps get rid of Salah and go in Haaland's direction? But that's been taken out of the equation from FPL because of his injury, and the best replacements for him include Isak if he's fit, Marmoush, and I'd also suggest Jean-Philippe Mateta, despite the fact he was subbed off at 59 minutes against Southampton in that 1-1 draw. So there's a very simple one, of course, but for those that aren't aware, Erling Haaland is red flagged. He's going to miss the next couple of matches. So it's a very easy sell at that price tag. It's just very difficult to really make any sort of case of maybe being a bit clever and saving this for another week. He is a priority sell. He's the first one you should be focusing on, and the best replacements have been discussed in this section. You might be surprised by the amount of fantasy assists Savio has in the Premier League this season with 11, but only 1 goal in this competition, 43 key passes, 100 FPL points which he reached in Gameweek 30 after a healthy return against Leicester City, and his ownership is extremely low. But I think the main appeal about buying Savio was in Gameweek 30 with that plum fixture, and for Double Gameweek 33 facing Everton away and potentially Aston Villa at home, that looks very solid as well from an offensive perspective. But I would definitely favour Marmoush at the moment, and the likes of Foden and Savio are both rotation risks. Now with Savio's cheaper price tag, that'll be less of an issue with him compared to Phil Foden, but it's still not ideal, and I don't think he's a great purchase for Gameweek 31 specifically facing Man United away, but I'll be happily proven wrong. And for those that own Savio, he's definitely worth keeping. But for new owners or those that are interested, I think the main appeal from Savio, it has definitely kind of gone by with that Leicester fixture. And despite having some solid stats across the board for a budget midfielder, I think you can find better value elsewhere with Eze, Gordon, Sarr, even Bowen, Jacob Murphy, and focus on those that are doubling in 32 and 33 who are more nailed on. Because with Savio, he might double in 33, but at the same time, will he start both matches? I'd be very surprised if that was the case. So for me, Savio is a skip. Despite Southampton's solid performance against Crystal Palace in that 1-1 draw, I still think they're worth targeting in most game weeks, and if Heung-min Son starts, I think he's a great 1-week punt here, and he might be the best of any player in terms of the captaincy this week. But Spurs will be heavily focused on that Europa League, so the likes of Heung-min Son are rotation risks. If there are reliable sources that indicate he is going to start, I would highly recommend him. He boasts an incredible record against Southampton with 13 goals and 8 assists across all competitions. In just a matter of 18 appearances, he has blanked in 4 of those matches against the Saints, so it is one of his favourite opponents throughout his entire career. And if he doesn't start, or if we get that kind of news before the deadline, you might want to look at another Spurs asset who is expected to start instead, maybe the likes of Brennan Johnson or Dominic Solanke, for example. But Spurs will definitely have one eye on that Europa League fixture against Eintracht Frankfurt. But Heung-min Son still has some decent stats, like 7 goals, 10 fantasy assists, 16 big chance created, and 123 FPL points. He can blank more often than not, but when he does return, they tend to be some huge returns. A double-digit haul, for example, getting a goal and an assist in the same fixture. So I think Heung-min Son is the best 1-week punt if he's expected to start in Gameweek 31. Let's flip the script a little bit and go for a hold at the end of this video in terms of the final player being highlighted, and that is Jurrien Timber. And I think the key reason why that is because he's kind of flirting between a hold and a sell because we don't know enough about his injury, but he was able to play on until the 75th minute, and he banked a clean sheet against Fulham, who scored in the 94th in the end, and he also got a bonus point to deliver 7 overall. But his attacking numbers aren't that great, even for a defender. 1 goal, 2 assists, the XGI, the expected goal involvements, is 2.23, and he has 108 FPL points, so he's not too far off Gabriel, and to be honest, he might offer better value than the Brazilian, even if he ends up being fit, which I very much doubt. And if that is the case, and Gabriel does miss the next couple of matches and Timber's injury isn't too serious, that just makes him even more nailed on, especially with Ben White kind of disappearing from the Arsenal squad in Gameweek 30 in the build-up to it, which I covered in the deadline stream. So I think Jurrien Timber might be the best Arsenal defender from now until the end of the season, depending on the injuries to him, Gabriel and Ben White. Those are all very crucial as well. But I think Jurrien Timber is probably worth holding, and I could see him being available very soon, especially in time for Double Gameweek 33, which is the most important. That concludes another Transfers podcast for the season, this time out of Gameweek 31. You can see the most transferred up players at this point in the game week on screen. Justin Kluivert is top, with Chris Wood, Gabriel, Trent and Palmer completing the top 5 Even Erling Haaland is right up there, but he is owned by a quarter of the game still. And you've got the likes of Aina and other players I've covered in this video who you can see on screen. And I've also covered some lower owned players and differentials as 1 week punts, players to buy in the future, and some to skip as well, because there are a lot of different categories, in my opinion, for Fantasy Premier League with all these double and blank game weeks coming up. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for more FPL and use fantasy content. There will be the Champions League returning next week, and that means a deadline stream next Tuesday. I hope to have you on board. The same goes for the deadline stream for FPL on Saturday.